Hello everyone and welcome to Ohio Nicole Creates. This week I am sharing my process video for a new page spread in my journal. And I was really excited to do this page spread because I've received a new ephemera pack from Unwrinkled, and this is Curtain Call, which is a pack that contains a lot of great pieces related to the theater and to movies and to music. So there were some great sheet music here, as well as playbills and different plays and stage directions and stage schematics and all kinds of great things. So I was really excited to get into this packet and just kind of see what it had. So to create my journal, I'm actually completing one of the Unwrinkled challenges, which is to incorporate a music, a playing card, stitching, and something from a playbill. So I thought this would be a fun way to get some basic pieces and then build a journal from it. And then I've also got two pieces here that if you've been following any of my other videos, I've been posting a new watercolor video where I'm following tutorials each day as I'm learning how to watercolor and improving my skills. And so for some of the pieces that haven't turned out great, I have been cutting out elements that I like and saving them for my journal. So you can see this little daffodil will be hopping around my desk because I really wanted to include it in my kit this week, or in my page this week. So here I am just kind of flipping through the kit and looking for elements that stand out to me or that I would like to include. And this image of the two women really stuck out to me. I'm not sure what movie it's from, so if you do know, let me know. I'd love to know. To begin my page, I am just watercoloring a background, and I thought since the theme is the theater and movies and music, I really had to go with that bright red velvety curtain color for the background. And this just kind of reminded me of the curtains that you see in the traditional theater, and then also that nice red background that we see when we go to the modern day movies. So I wanted to make sure to have a nice deep red background for this page to kind of give it an overall unifying color. And to complete it, I just watercolored, and I didn't bother the middle because I knew I would be covering that up with a piece of sheet music. And so I've picked my music, and I am just ripping the edges just a little bit to give it a little interest and to make it have a little bit of interesting form on the page. And then in order to make the piece of sheet music a focal point, I'm thinking of that amazing moment when you sit down in the theater to watch a period piece or an action adventure piece, and the movie starts and it pans out over some kind of amazing scenery, like mountains or hills or just some kind of scope of the setting of the story that you will be watching. So I wanted to replicate that with the sheet music kind of acting as a screen. And in order to do that, I have just painted a blue sky, and then I'm giving some shapes that mimic hills. This is not a very detailed watercolor. I'm just kind of playing with color and playing with form and trying to create a background that will enhance the focal images that I have selected for the piece. With watercoloring on older pages or vintage or antiqued pages, I find that sometimes the watercolor takes really easily, and sometimes the watercolor can actually smear the ink. So it's just a bit of trial and error. You can use a medium to prepare a piece before watercoloring if you ever want to do a piece of sheet music and paint a nice image on it or something as a gift. I would recommend doing that that. But for my purposes for the art journaling, I found that just watercoloring directly on the page, as long as I'm mindful of how much water the page can take, has turned out really well. And then using the heat gun to dry between layers is really helpful too, so that I don't overwork the page and or cause holes. So that's just a quick tip if this is something that you'd like to incorporate into your own journals. I really love the look of the scenery over sheet music. I'd like to do a more detailed background using this method at some point. Once I'm done completing the background, I did have this little image in my packet, and I'm not sure, I want to say this is from Gone with the Wind, but I'm not sure what movie it's from, but it's a woman who's holding, it looks like the board that you snap between scenes. Forgive me for not knowing the name of that instrument, but I wanted to paint her with some complementary colors, and so I have given her a nice yellow dress, and I'm painting the sky behind her, and just going for that nice kind of colorized image look that we see in a lot of old movies. When I was younger, I would often spend the night with my aunt, and we would stay up late and watch the Turner Classic movie of the week over the weekend. And after that movie was over, we would usually watch an episode of Star Trek. But it was really neat because we saw a lot of old colorized movies. We watched Casablanca and Rear Window, and I think Gone with the Wind and a lot of other movies. So I really love this kind of colorized look, and it's something that I like to incorporate in a lot of my pieces. And I did leave the frame on it, so it just looked like a vintage photograph. Part of the challenge was to include a playing card. So the particular playing cards that were included had different composers on it. And this is Puccini, who wrote in the later half of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, and he did operas. So I wanted to include him because I thought it was a striking image. What I'm doing now is going through my playbill to find some elements that I would like to include, and I found that there were several really interesting interviews, and the interviews had some neat quotes, so I cut out quotes to include in my image. In addition, I'm just picking out some random plays and cutting out dialogue from these plays, and they're not plays that I had ever read, but they did sound interesting. So a lot of dialogue on invitations and being invited and overstaying invitations and things like that. So I thought it would just make an interesting focal piece for the page. So here I am cutting out those quotes to include. I'm not quite sure yet how I will include them, but they were interesting, and I knew that they would make an interesting piece for the overall page. To add just a little bit more interest, I am painting the two strips different colors of purple. One of my original plans was to do kind of like a purplish mountain scene in the back. I did decide to go a little bit simpler, but I did want to bring in that rich purple color. I always associate purple with the older movie theaters, because the one by my house when I was growing up actually had velvet purple seats, which I just thought were the coolest thing. So I wanted to bring in a little bit of that color. And then here again is that image that I pulled out from my first run through of the pack here. I really liked the way it looked as if the one woman was consoling the other as she stared off into the mid-distance. I believe that's what it's called in the theater when the actor stares off while they're thinking their deep thoughts. Now that I have all of the pieces cut out and ready, I'm just starting to arrange them on the page and decide where I want the different elements to anchor the piece. And as I mentioned before, I wanted to have that nice kind of movie screen effect. A nice thing about putting a big piece in the middle is it also covers up the joiner between the two pages, which for art journaling can help to unify the page. And I wanted to put the two women in the bottom as if they were actresses perhaps in this movie, or maybe even viewers of the movie. And then the quotes that I picked were life is not as good as musical theater, life is never as exciting as musical theater. And then the other quote said, I shall always remember the things you never forget. And I just really liked the way that that sounded, so I wanted to include those two elements as well. After I have anchored the two main pieces, I'm just kind of playing around with the arrangement and seeing where I want to include the different elements. I have a tendency to put a lot on a page. I really like to tell a story. I like to include a lot of elements, and I was trying to edit myself and not add as much on to this particular piece as I normally do. So that was my challenge to myself. Another portion of the Thursday challenge was to include stitches, either drawn or sewn. And so this might be cheating a little bit, but I wanted to include some lace. Lace is not exactly hand stitching, but it is kind of in that same area of textiles. So I found this nice piece and I just decided to glue it to the back of the card so that I could make a cluster of images to include. And I put those in the adjacent corner so that they will balance out the two women on the bottom of the page. I did end up gluing the lace down at the edges just because it was so close to the middle of the spread. I didn't want to have it folding over or folding in on itself. Finally, I still really wanted to include the daffodil that I had painted, so I'm playing around with that. And then I also wanted to include a film slide. There were several film slides included with the curtain call package, and this particular one that I'm using was a man on a horse. So I just cut out a piece of text to glue behind it just to illuminate the image just a little bit, so we could get an idea of what was on that slide. And then I glue the slide in as part of that cluster. And then there were film pieces included. I forgot to look inside the envelope until the end, so I really wanted to include them, but since I had already arranged everything else on the page, I just decided to save them for another project when they would be better suited. I did add in my daffodil, and then the name of that music was Pining, which I thought worked really well with the two women. So if this is my kit this week, thank you so much for watching my process video, and I would love to hear from you. Bye.